Welcome back to the channel. We're going to review our entire inventory that we're bringing to the Fort Worth Collecticon here in this first weekend of April. Slabs, singles. We're excited to share all of it. We've been buying really heavy the last 2 weeks since we got home from Houston. So let's get right into it and show you guys what we're bringing. So we haven't gone through and priced everything quite yet. You'll see some price stickers, but those are from previous shows, previous weeks. So don't be worried about what things are priced at. Obviously, we try to keep things as up to date as possible. The market's crazy right now, so we price things almost every single week. But let's show you guys what we've got going on here. First, we've got some graded cards. We'll start with the slabs. First, we've got, make sure it's lined up nicely. Yeah, we've got this Magneton Mysterious Mountains First Edition. Beautiful card. And while we're here, I think it would be worthwhile, one thing that's kind of been on my mind is just the nature of the market, and specifically for some of these low population cards. We have a couple in our inventory right now, some low pop vintage stuff, you know, like the hollows from e-reader sets and reverse hollows from some of those Gen 3 sets that are just extremely hard to come by. And there are a lot of opinions out there about, you know, what the future of those cards really could look like. And I want to just kind of weigh in, because I own a good amount of those. You know, I collect those things that are a bit more exclusive, harder to find, and low population. And when I'm talking about population, I'm talking specifically about the PSA 10 population of the cards. And I've heard some opinions from different creators and collectors and vendors that they think these things are just going to keep going up and up because, you know, they're trading hands right now as things are getting repriced at an extremely rapid pace. But eventually those cards are going to end up with, you know, the actual kind of end quote-unquote consumer, the collector who wants it either for a vault or for a display or, you know, maybe a speculation, an investment of some sort. And then at that point, because it will get kind of removed from the marketplace, that the value of that card will go up because there's going to be a smaller number of them in circulation. And I think that there's a lot of merit to that argument. You know, just pretty classic supply and demand curve. If there's less of them on the market, and, you know, presumably there's still a lot of people who want them, then there's just less cards available. And I think that although that is a factor when it comes down to the, you know, the end sale price of items, I think there's also a lot of other things that you have to consider. And you also have to consider, for example, how many more of those cards are going to get introduced to the marketplace. And from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from some of these companies that are doing a lot of like vintage pack openings, live streaming, that kind of stuff, it seems like vintage packs are getting harder and harder to find and are also going up in price. So it's not just that the cards inside them, or potentially inside them, are increasing in value and then that kind of pulls up the pack price, because that kind of relationship definitely happens. But the packs themselves are getting more scarce. And I'm seeing this kind of firsthand. In my collection, I do have a sealed pack of the Legendary Collection set. It seems like those loose packs for a Legendary Collection are selling for $5,000 and higher, $5,000 to $7,000 per pack. And if you're someone who is buying and selling or opening those and my numbers are off, please correct me in the comments section. But that's kind of what I'm seeing on eBay. And I don't know quite what to think about that, because there's just kind of an unknown quantity of those in circulation of any pack, obviously. But the vintage stuff, there's a presumption that because it's so old and people have had the opportunity to open it for many years, that there's just not that many of them out there. And yet, you still hear stories of people who were former card shop owners, or had stashed them away in closets and attics and stuff like that those come to light, and more packs hit the market. So it's really just hard to kind of identify the actual rarity of those vintage sealed items. But what I can say for sure is that they are selling for all-time high prices, which is also like that kind of interrelationship between the sealed pack, the box, the blisters, etc., and the chase cards, specifically the graded in a 10 condition chase cards. That relationship it's kind of like a positive feedback loop. As one goes up, the other goes up, and as that one goes up, it kind of pushes the other one, and it just it's a cycle of then just continuing to increase in price over time. But that's also buoyed up by a generally very strong market. What do I mean by a strong market? You hear this all the time. The market's really strong right now. I think mostly what people are referring to in a strong market is, yes, items are selling for all-time highs. Things are expensive. The newest sets are coming out and they're hard to get, obviously. We hear a lot of discourse about that. But also just the relative liquidity of items. And here's kind of what I want to add to this discussion. Everything I've said up to this point, I'm sure you probably have heard before. But the point that I want to add here in relationship to these higher end vintage low pop cards is that they are more liquid than they have ever been. And why is that? How is that possible? How is it that we've got these bigger cards that historically have been considered, this is a really thinly traded item. You're not going to see it come up for auction very often. You're not going to see it at a card show very often. How is it that those things are trading back and forth so much more frequently than maybe they did in the past? And it's this kind of interplay between the market increasing in size. There's more people, there's more money flowing in. So there's more people that could potentially be interested in those cards. And then as they go up in price, the people who had held them and have that kind of price memory of, this card for the longest time was selling for $1,000, and now people are able to sell it for $4,000 or $5,000. I should probably capitalize on that exponential growth in a short period of time and cash out, sell that card, make a 400% return on something that you had hopes and dreams of it going up in value, but you didn't really buy it for that purpose. Or maybe the original, the collectors and those who were hoarding them did not buy them originally for the purpose of being able to sell them in a short period of time for such exponential growth. But that's the fact. And those people are... Sorry, I just have a duplicate birthday Pikachu. I've got like 4 copies of this right now. Those people, or a portion of the people who have had these cards, are willing to sell them at these prices. And they send them to auction at on eBay, or they sell them to someone who takes them to a card show, or maybe they have their own sales channel built out and they sell them privately on Instagram or elsewhere. And those now become public comps for those cards that kind of prove to the rest of the of the people who are paying attention that those cards are selling, and someone out there is willing to pay that really high price for them. So that's a kind of an influx of confidence into the market. It's like, okay, I have these expensive items, or items that I at least believe are rare and desirable, but now that hypothesis is backed up by the fact that they have now sold for a really high price. So that's an important data point. Then you've got the phenomenon of, okay, it's a thinly traded item, or in other words, there's not very many of them. They don't transact every day like a Van Gogh Pikachu or a Moonbryon from Evolving Skies. And so there's this idea of scarcity, and for those that have the ability to acquire those items or who are willing to pay up for them, they now are they're working with an item that they know other people would want and can't get because they simply aren't available on the generally kind of accessible market platforms like eBay, Fanatics, elsewhere. And if they're not accessible there, if you can't simply just go online and say, hey, I want this card in a PSA 10 at a similar price as the average of the last few. Oh, we got this sequential starter share. That's nice. If you can't access it, then if you really want that card, then you're going to have to probably pay up for it. Either you're going to look at whatever listing is available on eBay, and a lot of those for these lower pop cards are like 2 or 3 times higher than their previous sale prices. And maybe you can negotiate with the seller there and try to buy it for less than the listing, and that happens frequently. Things are marked as best offer, but they still are making all-time high record sales. So again, let's say you're the person who buys that item. You now have a very in-demand and hard-to-acquire item, and maybe you were the person who paid the all-time high price for it. But even so, no one else can have it. And so maybe you bring it to a card show, or you have kind of a following on Instagram or elsewhere, and you're able to show that card off. And through that, number one, you advertise that you have one and that it's something that somebody else could potentially ask to buy from you. And number two, you might just kind of attract someone to wanting that card in the first place, because there are people who are in the hobby or are just recently entering the hobby who are very well capitalized. They have a lot of money to spend on these cards, but they just don't know about certain cards yet. They just haven't seen them, haven't heard of them, didn't know that they were really desirable. And now that they see your copy, they're like, whoa, maybe I really need that. And then it can sell privately for an all-time high. Maybe even right after you paid an all-time high for it, maybe you can turn around and resell it for an all-time high. That phenomenon, while the market is strong, is happening frequently. And it's hard to imagine exactly what will be the catalyst of that stopping. What's going to slow it down? Is it something to do with modern product, and maybe Pokemon puts out a couple of sets that are just not quite as nostalgic and don't have as much of a fan base as previous sets? Maybe that has something to do with it. But the thing is, there's now such a precedent over the last almost 12 months of those cards just consistently hitting an all-time high that almost every person who has one is gonna feel that confidence of, man, I don't feel like there's any reason why I should sell this for the same amount or less than what I got it for. And because those cards have traded hands so frequently in the last couple of months, maybe the last few weeks, the only way to get it from them would be to be the person that pays the new all-time high or values it at the new all-time high and then works a trade deal out. That is the phenomenon that is happening right now. And to add on top of that, that's not just what's happening privately. What's happening privately is being backed up by what's happening publicly with these auctions going for all-time highs. And so the other phenomenon is people don't want to miss the boat. They don't want to be the person who, sold the card too early, because that's now happened. Like anybody who's been buying and selling and trading at a fair pace the last year has stories, sometimes many stories, and sometimes stories of, extreme opportunity loss where they sold something too early. And although there's, the right mentality should be like, oh, well, you sold it, you made a profit, or you use that money for something else that was more important to you, or whatever the story may be. All that's fine and good, but you also probably learn a lesson from selling something a little too early, and you're like, man, I'm probably going to take my time and be a little more careful and not do that next time. See if I can maximize the number that I get for this card. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. The private sales are fueling the public sales. The public sales are fueling the private sales. And more people. Oh, here's one more phenomenon that I think is worthy to talk about. And I've mentioned this on previous programs or videos before as well. But this phenomenon of more and more people entering the hobby and more people buying and selling and trading at a high level, right? So if you imagine the hobby as kind of a bell curve of people, you're going to have, as you increase the size of the bell curve, right? Just more people enter the community. The amount of people that are in the top 50% as far as capitalization, how much money they're willing to put into the hobby, that just organically grows as well. And when that organically grows, the number of people who are willing to maybe work the hobby as a side hustle, or even take their side hustle and go full time. I did that in 2024. We've got my friend Ricky from Oyama doing that this year. Other people all throughout the last 18 months have decided to take the hobby and go full time into buying and selling and trading. And those people, if they've been participating in the buy, sell, trade for the last 18 months, have done most likely extremely well. And they've got all this kind of confidence and evidence in their mind of, wow, I just made, a larger increase or built a business in such a short period of time based on these cards. I think that I'm going to double down. I'm going to be willing to keep my capital invested and keep my focus invested in this hobby, because it's going to keep returning those same kind of returns. And when that happens, there's just more people at the top end of the hobby who are willing to have a large portion of their liquid net worth invested in these cards. And that means that the cool cards that higher end collectors might want for their personal collections, there's more people willing to go after those cards, willing to take the risk, or what used to be perceived as a really high risk, to have a large amount of money, of value, put into those cards. And so again, it's this incredible positive feedback loop of not very many of these high-end cards available. More people exist who are willing to buy high-end cards, and it could continue to drive that price up and up and up. And the only change, it seems to me, would have to be systemic. It would have to be something kind of way out of the actual hobby base that would change that relationship between those high-end cards and those high-end buyers. Now, one thing I do want to share here is, like I said, I don't have all of these cards priced. And I have been using recently to price my cards the Double Hollow app, and I am partnered with them, and also I'm part of the founding team trying to build out that app into something that is really beneficial for collectors of all types, all levels. And so, for example, when I'm going to price that Moonbryon there, so we've got it here. This is a beautiful 12 cert Moonbryon PSA 10. We bought this at a local show last weekend. Well, I can go into the Double Hollow app, which is available on iOS and Android, I believe now. We just rolled that out. And I can search the Umbreon VMAX, and I can select, what condition I'm considering to price it in, or considering to look up the value in. Raw, PSA, BGS, CGC, tag, etc., grade 10. And then one of my favorite things right here is this right here, the last 5 sales average, 3929.8. I have comped so many cards in the last 2 or 3 years, slabs, singles, etc. And the most important information that I was looking for was, what is it selling for now? What are those last 5 to 10 comps that I can look at and see, okay, this is what it's trading for now, because the market's moving so fast that's the kind of information that you need. Now, for other cards, or if you're looking to do more detailed analysis, you're also going to have a 3-month price history, 6-month, a year price history, etc. And you also get these really cool AI analysis tools. We have algorithms that are scraping information on the internet to figure out what are people talking about in relationship to a specific card, and then we aggregate that information and have an AI tool that says, hey, what kind of signal is the community saying about this card? Is it a buy? Is it a sell? Is it a hold? Is it something that you should consider having in your collection right now from a value standpoint, not from like a necessarily because it's beautiful. Like if you just want to collect something because you like it, go for it. But if you're looking to make some sort of quasi-speculative play in relationship to the item that you buy, then this can be some really helpful information. Some slab insights, again, high sales, low sales, what the trend is, and then you can see some price forecasting, grading ROI analysis. This is a really cool tool where you can see, okay, if I have this card in near mint condition, what kind of increase in value can I expect if I sent it to grade, and if it got a 10, is it worth my time? Is the difference between raw and 10 significant enough to, make sense for the fact that you're going to send it to PSA and potentially have to wait months and months? So again, lots of data here. I'm using this tool to price cards lately, and I recommend it, and we're going to continue to build it out and try to make it into something that's really beneficial for all collectors, whether you're vending, whether you're just buying for your personal collection, or whatever you do. So, and if you've got feedback for what we're doing with the app, then please let us know. Send us messages, send any feedback directly to the Double Hollow Instagram page. Again, we're actively building out, meeting every single week to talk about features and stuff like that. So appreciate you guys trying it out. All right, so again, back to the low pop conversation. I've talked about this as well on previous, Q&A kind of stuff and podcasts. I own a good amount of these kinds of cards. There's another Moonbryon. I own a good amount of these low pop, hard to find cards, and I just I go back and forth every single day. Is it the right time to sell, and what do I do with that value? Like, do I sell those cards and then buy right back in for other things? And it's just it's a conundrum. I know a lot of people are going through that right now. We're getting into the ungraded half art / vintage singles now. I wanted to also just provide a small piece of advice in regards to those who, well, let's start with those who have these cards that I'm talking about. Some of these vintage, low pop, very desirable cards that you're seeing hit all-time highs on, whether it's through Instagram sales that you hear about, or through online auctions and buy it nows and stuff like that we can all access and see. What do you do if you're the person who bought that card and has just absolutely seen it explode in value? Well, first, be grateful, be excited. Don't let it stress you out. Something really cool has happened. This is an opportunity, and not that you have to take any specific action on every opportunity, but it's exciting to have options, right? So that's the first place. Number 2 is when you're thinking about selling anything, and we talked about this on other videos, but when you're thinking about selling anything, considering to sell, stressful thinking, of course, you need to be thoughtful about what exactly it is you're going to do with that money. And if you're the type of person who is like pretty calculated and financially intentional, then you can probably be confident that you're going to put that money to good use, whether it's in the hobby or out of the hobby. And if you have some sort of life event, again, if you have like a life event that you're saving up for, then obviously it justifies selling. If you're trying to buy a house or to stack up some savings in preparation for a child or for a wedding or for a new car, or to do landscaping at the house, or those kinds of bigger expenses, or just to build out your emergency fund. Again, not a financial professional expert. I'm not. This is not financial advice, but I personally prioritized having an emergency fund long before having some sort of beefed up Pokemon collection, because you want to be ready for whatever can happen in the future. Anyways, moving on. When you're considering to sell, not for those sorts of like life event reasons, but just because you're concerned about locking in gains, as they say, locking in the value increase that you so far is just on paper or on your phone screen, then it's not as simple as, oh, it went up 50%, 100%, it's time to sell. I understand it can be complicated, and I get questions all the time, whether it's in Midweek Machamps or in my DMs or in my email or anywhere. JARCHAMP, what do you think I should do? This card has just absolutely ballooned in price. I'm thinking about these other items. No one has a crystal ball. No one can tell exactly what the future holds for, whether the item that you already have, or maybe an item that you're considering to get with the proceeds of, when you sell the card or the box or whatever that you have already. You can get a lot of opinions out there, and some people are going to be able to give you a very objective opinion. I would say, in my experience, most people in the hobby are giving opinions based on their personal experience and their personal sales channels. So, if your thought is, wow, I should consider buying or selling this thing and buying this other thing, most likely you're going to consider buying into the thing that is similar to the other items that have done the best for you. And that's just human nature, right? When we get evidence that something is working, we tend to try it again. We tend to like it. We tend to prefer that, right? It's a kind of that positive reinforcement. And that's the trouble with speculations / investing in alternative, stores of value, is just like investing in traditional things, there's always the human element. There's always this psychological element of, am I doing this because it's the right move, or am I doing this because I have some emotional reaction to this market, or because I read something online and I swirl here on the tail of this Mew. It's so difficult to separate the emotional and the logical when it comes to, money plays of some sort. So, actual advice when it comes to managing what's going on in your collection. I still, despite maybe what some people think, I still am a person who really likes these cards. I have cards in my personal collection, mostly like vintage master sets and stuff like that, that I would sell so many other things in my life before I would sell those. Because in my experience and in my, emotional reaction to the hobby, I'm closer to those things than I am to some other things. Like there are items in my collection that I would sell vehicles before I would sell that if stuff really hit the fan. That's a fact. Just because, in my mind there's a replacement aspect to it. And so that's what I'm getting at. If these are items that we're talking about that you're considering selling, that, again, all the other stuff aside, you're in a financially good place, you're not hurting for money, but the only reason you're considering to sell is, like we said before, because you're hoping to potentially lock in increases of value that you have seen through public sales or private sales that you've heard of. That's the only reason you're selling. And it's the kind of item that you would very much potentially like to own again in the future. You need to think twice. You need to think twice. Because here's another fact for you. A generalization, but a fact of statistics, that one of the primary factors for your level of wealth personally is how old you are. Sometimes the simplest answer for how do I build wealth, the answer is to just keep living, keep working, keep doing the things that you're doing, and allow the effort and the time and the connections and the things that you're naturally already doing day to day to accumulate to the point where you're able to build wealth. Or you are. Maybe you're just, steadily investing over time. And the reason I say that is because a future version of yourself, who very possibly, again, if you're intentional and you're working hard, maybe you have a career that you're working on or a business that you're working on, the future version of yourself who most likely is in a better financial position than you are today. Is that version of you someone who cares as much about the potential money, the potential proceeds of the sale of the card that you have in your collection right now? Do they care as much about that money as they would about still having that item in their possession? And the reason that's an important question to ask is because maybe the current version of you thinks that amount of money that you could potentially gain from selling that card, it's like, oh, that's a lot of money. Maybe that's the current version of you. Maybe that's their opinion. But the future version of you, maybe a future version doesn't think it's that much money. Here's an example. And I've talked about it before. If you follow the channel, then you know this story. But when I first got pretty serious about vending, I took in trade plus cash. I picked up my first ever Gold Star card, and it was a Gold Star Mewtwo from Holland Phantoms, and it was graded in a Beckett 9.5, and all 4 subgrades were 9.5. So centering, surface, corners, etc., all of it was 9.5s. And when I would look at the slab, I was like, you know what? This is really clean. Now, I wasn't brave enough at that point immediately when I got it to crack it out of that slab and to send it in to get graded by PSA to see if it would cross to a 10. But as I, continued to vend, the amount of money that I had put into that card started to feel like a smaller and smaller portion of my overall business inventory and my overall net worth even, right? So the later version of me was willing to take that risk to crack it out of the slab and to send it into PSA. And to not feel like it was a huge risk in proportion to everything else I had going on at that point. So we did that. We cracked it out, sent it into PSA. They gave it a 10. It was an immaculate copy. PSA 10, it was a 10 cert with a swirl right on the tail of the Mewtwo. One of my favorite sets of all time, Holland Phantoms. I was ecstatic. You can go to my Instagram and check it out. We did a little kind of short form video talking about getting the card and getting it back graded. I was ecstatic. And I knew it was valuable, obviously, but this was before some of these vintage boom seasons that we've seen. This is before last summer when vintage cards really started to get hot again. And then it was before this winter and spring when vintage cards went absolutely bazooka. And so I decided, but even so, it was a valuable card. And I had a couple people hit me up on Instagram and say, hey, are you selling that card? How much do you want for it? And I had no idea how to value it. I had a very limited experience in vintage cards, vintage grail high-end cards like that. I had never had a single card that was worth in the high 4 figures or potentially a 5-figure card. Never. And so I took it to LA Collecticon in March of last year. And someone with a better sales channel for higher end cards like that bought the card from me for as far as I knew, an all-time high price. Pretty close to what I felt like was a ridiculous asking price. I think my asking price was $10,000, and I got like $9,200 out of it or something like that. And I was exhilarated about, that being a really big deal, and our margin on it was really great because I got it. I sent it in to get graded myself and all that, extra detail. And the version of me then was very excited about that deal, about that card, about that trade. But I can tell you with 100% surety that the version of me now wishes I still had that card, even if it hadn't performed like it has. And it has performed. That card since then has gone up 10x in value. I think people are asking nearly $100,000 for a new cert, swirled up PSA 10 English Gold Star Mewtwo. And I can't blame them. An incredible card. Even if it hadn't performed like that, the story behind it, the rarity of it, the condition, all of that stuff, all of those factors make me, and again, the word regret is a strong word, because obviously, I operated at that time based on information and a perception of myself that was totally true back then. And so I don't regret selling it, but I do wish I still had it, if that makes sense. And this all circles back to the cost of replacement. I have cards in my personal collection right now that I bought or traded for or whatever, or graded, long before they were worth anywhere near what they're worth today. And I like them. They have stories, etc. And if I was to sell them based on what the market has been doing, if I wanted to reacquire them, I wanted to get those cards back somehow, it would be tough. It would be not only like expensive, and expensive is one thing. Like having the money to buy something is one thing, right? Like, is the balance in your bank sufficient enough to cover the cost? That is one thing. But the having that amount of money and thinking that it's a good use of that money is different. You know what I mean? And I would be hard pressed to sell some of these cards that I have and that I really think are worth what they're worth right now. And then if someone, let's say I sold one, and then the next patron walked up to my table or something and they said, "Hey, I just saw you sell that card for, $10,000. I'd be interested in selling you my copy for, 90% or 95% of 10,000 or whatever they, would want to sell it for." I don't know if I'd be willing to do it, and I get that also kind of comes back to this idea that the entire hobby is about hot potato, and selling cards that are, to someone that values them more than the market values them, but you kind of make a profit on them and then you move on, kind of thing. And hopefully you're not the last person in line who pays that all-time highest price. But it's more complicated than that, right? Because all-time price for what period of time? Like, how long is it going to be the all-time high price? That's the question you don't know the answer to, but that you might feel like you can do more with the value that you get out of that card. You get that 10,000, and let's say the profit or whatever, the increase in value was half. It was 5,000. Like, you feel like you can do more with that 5,000 than what you feel like is possible with owning that card and what it individually will perform as. Complicated topic, guys, but let me know in the comment section how you're approaching it, because and this is true for all levels of collectors. I would say anyone who's been involved in the hobby for 6 months or so, maybe even 3 months, you probably own things that are worth more today than they were when you started or when you got it. So how are you approaching that? And that's the end of my conversation on that topic right for now, guys. But as you can see, we've got lots of really beautiful vintage cards. And maybe this is a good place to kind of talk about what we've been up to the last few weeks. I know we gave kind of a general business update in our most recent Chompcast, where we talked about adding on my sister to the team as a new employee. Shout out River. She also goes by the Jarachi. So we've got JARCHAMP, we've got Jarvitar, and now Jarachi. So shout out Jarachi in the comment section. So that has actually taken up a lot of our bandwidth, right? So adding a new employee, helping her and her partner move across the entire country. It's been complicated and lots of moving pieces and lots of work. But the dust is kind of settling on that big transition. We had a business meeting yesterday about what the next few months look like. And man, we are so booked. I'm gonna try to say the shows and the locations we're gonna be at in order. Maybe I should just pull it up so you guys know exactly. For April, we've got Fort Worth Collecticon that we're gonna be headed to. We'll fly there on Friday, and we'll be there Saturday and Sunday, of course, in Fort Worth for Collecticon. Then Trey and I go to the HobbyCon in Toronto. So our first time ever doing a show outside of the United States. We're going up to Canada. So that's the weekend following Fort Worth Collecticon. Then that third weekend of April, we're going to be in Indianapolis for the Collectors Palooza. We did that show back in December. Really great time. Really cool community. Had a good experience. So we going back to that. Then we go right to Chicago Collecticon the weekend after Collector Palooza. But don't worry, the weekend after that is Las Vegas Front Row Card Show. Then we have a cool new show the weekend after Front Row Vegas. We're headed to Collect a Conway, which is an Arkansas card show that we got invited to. And I've never been to Arkansas. Or maybe I've driven through, but I've never spent any time there. And so we're excited for that. And if you are in the South and have any sort of access to Conway, Arkansas, come see us. We're going to be there. That is May 9th and 10th. We're going to be in Arkansas. And I'm also excited about that because one of the bigger game stores in the country, or at least one of the more kind of notorious ones, is Retro Rick's Game Corner, and I believe that's in Conway, Arkansas, and he's a creator I followed for a long time, so I'm excited to go to that store and check it out. Maybe get a little bit of inspiration. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a JARCHAMP LGS at some point? Ooh, wow. Wouldn't that be great? So that is that second weekend in May. Third weekend in May is Phoenix Collecticon, which we'll be going to. Then fourth weekend in May is the card party, the first card party of the year. Shout out Deep Pocket Monster, Pat Flynn. We're going to be going to Card Party in San Diego. 3-day show, that third weekend in May. It's going to be crazy fun. And then we have, right after that, we'll stay in SoCal and we will attend the West Coast Card Show. So if you guys didn't catch the vibe there, that means we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So counting this show that we just did in Ogden, that was a local show. From that show until the West Coast Card Show, that is a major card show every single weekend for 9 straight weekends, I believe it is. That's crazy. And so why do I say all that? Well, I say all that because we're going to need all this inventory that we're showing off. To have that many shows in a row, it can be tough to manage your inventory to make sure that you have the right balance of the right amount to bring to these shows. You don't want to have too much and not have a good cash position to be able to buy things when you go to the shows. And you don't want to have not enough cards that, because at all these shows I have fronted the money for table space and all that kind of stuff. And so I want to have enough cards available that we can actually take advantage of the real estate that we're paying for in the showroom. It is a delicate balance, and I don't have a perfect science for it. But in general, we're always buying. And so if you come to the show, feel free to come work out a deal with us. You've come to any of those shows, feel free to work a deal with us. Bring some cards if you're wanting to sell or to trade. And if you like these kinds of cards, these vintage cards, we almost always try to have a good selection of vintage and half art cards like this that have some value. Because that's personally what I collect. It's personally what I collect. So that's what's going on with the JARCHAMP business. Now, some people ask, what is River going to be up to? That's my sister. What role is she going to play? Well, now that Franny has stepped away from the content creation, we've got Trey, the Jarvatar, leaning into more of the content piece. So he's going to be the primary editor of our long form stuff, like the vendor POVs and those kinds of videos. And then my goal is to really get River trained up into understanding the fine art and science of buy, sell, trade. You know, what kind of cards are we looking for, pricing theory, and all of that kind of stuff. And that is the end of the half arts and vintage cards. Now we're going to get into the modern ones. Modern is kicked off with X and Y, well, some black and white, but mostly X and Y, and then we get into Sun and Moon. So let's start with the X and Y / black and white stuff. So while we're reviewing these guys, let me know in the comment section, are you going to be able to make it to any of those card shows that I highlighted there? So again, that was just April and May. Obviously, we've got more throughout the rest of the year, June and all the way through December. And I probably should get like a little graphic made on my Instagram so people know exactly where we're going to be, which parts of the country and all that kind of stuff. That probably would be helpful for people. But we also at the end of most of our YouTube videos will put like, hey, these are confirmed upcoming shows. But let us know in the comment section if you're gonna be able to go to any of these shows and meet us there. That'd be really, really cool to meet you. I know a lot of you who are viewers of the channel have already come to shows and maybe attend our stream and all that kind of stuff, and are avid supporters and even members of the channel. Thank you guys so much. Maybe that's a good next topic to chat about, which is just my gratitude for what's happened over the last 18 months or so, almost exactly, that I've been full-time in the hobby. It's been a ton of work. We're going to shows, and obviously you just heard a bit about kind of how our schedule is. It's been a ton of work, tons of travel, and very disruptive to what I could hopefully define as some sort of a routine, for sleeping and eating and getting exercise and those kinds of things. But I am very grateful to all of you guys for being involved and for being here, for watching the videos, for commenting, for providing criticism in the comment section or whatever about how we're doing things, or things that I'm saying, or things that I believe. That's all welcome here. But also all of you who have understood our intentions and done a lot of deals with us and know that we're trying to do things in the right way. And so you come to our defense in the comment section. I see that and I appreciate that. You guys are we're being treated very well in general, and there is a ton of negativity in the community, because as prices rise and as people lose access to things that they had before at the same price points, that can be very frustrating, and I understand that. But there's also a lot of positivity. We had that video that I posted a couple of Fridays ago, got a lot of negative feedback and other creators making content about us and stuff, and there was a lot of people that came to our defense and said some sweet things, and insisted that my intentions for the video were very good, and they were. We did a kind of a recap episode where I talked about why I said what I said in regards to managing your collection with more of a business mindset. And most people, I got a lot of DMs from people saying really kind stuff, and I appreciate that. I've had so many people come to the table, whether it's collectors or vendors, who have said that, you know, our work, our efforts have helped them in the hobby, either to just get more involved or to try new things and take risks and to believe in themselves and to change their outlook and what they're capable of financially or in their business or whatever. And that is it's very heartwarming, and I appreciate you all. Anyone who has shared kind words with us, I appreciate that. Anyone who's come to the table, who has come to our stream and bought something, or just come to the stream just to hang out and mess around. It's been a really cool 18 months, and I don't know exactly what the future holds. I have goals for, you know, the business and to get it to the point where it's able to, you know, fit into a maybe more regular lifestyle, maybe a little bit less traveling, maybe, you know, buy a house somewhere, you know, to settle down and have a few kids and that kind of stuff. But in the near term, we're really just trying to work hard and trying to meet as many of you as possible. And yeah, I have a lot of hope and confidence that that's going to do really well for us. And we don't know what the future of the Pokemon market will bring, but I can say that these last 18 months have definitely changed my outlook on what I think is possible from like an entrepreneurship standpoint, and also what I think is possible as far as like the cards that I feel like I can collect, you know. And that's the whole that was the whole reason for all of this in the beginning. And I think a lot of you who have tried to vend or have tried to, you know, build out sales channels online or elsewhere, that was your initial goal as well, which was, I want to learn how to sell a few things so that I can buy a few things for your personal collection and be able to financially justify it to yourself or to your family or whatever. That was the original goal for me. And that's still a big part of it. You know, when Franny and I made like our annual goal, when we kind of first had both left corporate, what was our annual goal and for this business? Goal number one was about building out a personal collection and doing so kind of side by side with building something that was successful enough to also allow us to live and pay our bills. So it has done that, and obviously done that to a degree to where I have been able to extend the circle of the business to add my siblings and, you know, have them come work with us. That's a really cool thing. It's a special thing, and it couldn't have happened without all of you guys being on this ride with us. So thank you. We're getting towards the end here, Sun and Moon. Oof. Little Archeostyle Palkia action there, and then the Ultra Necrozma. So that is all X, Y, and Sun Moon. Now we'll get into some Sword and Shield cards. Okay, Sword and Shield. We've got Vs, Full Art Vs, Alt Arts, and then we'll get into the VMAX and V Stars. Sword and Shield, a really like meaningful generation for me, as this is when I got much more involved in the hobby. Some of these sets are so iconic to me. Obviously, I'm a huge believer, buyer of Evolving Skies. Got the Evolving Skies Master Set that I finished a couple years back. And I just love these artworks. I think that they're so clean. One of the small kind of PC personal collection side quests that I'm working on is I've got 4 of the the kind of the slab wall displays, slab lab displays that my friend the Bulbasaur manufactures. And they are 3 by 3, so they have 9 total spaces in the display. And so I hung up 4 of them in my office. And because I love Evolving Skies so much, excuse me, I am I'm going to set up the display, or I'm about halfway through of setting up the display, where on one of the 9 slot holders I have the full art V's of all the evolutions, and then the Rayquaza in the middle, again to kind of signify Evolving Skies. And then one of the displays is for the alt art V's. One of the displays is for the regular VMAXs. And then one of the displays is for alt art VMAXs. And believe it or not, the ones that I see the least are the regular VMAXs in PSA 10 condition. And I mean, the simple answer for that is because there's just not much of a value increase when you grade some of those VMAXs. Like, for example, I just bought the Glaceon VMAX, the regular VMAX full art, not the alt art one. And like market price is like $35 or something like that for it. Which means, you know, you're buying the card, or maybe you have it ungraded and it's like a $2 to $5 card or something like that. And then grading fee right now for PSA is like minimum like $25 or whatever. And then you're going to wait 6 months or however long to get it back, only to have the potential, the opportunity to maybe value increase like, you know, 25 total dollars, but that's already eaten up by your grading fee. So the only reason to really grade those is because you would want them for your collection. And so I don't see them at shows very much. I might have to go and try to hunt those down, you know, on eBay or other places. But you know, I don't love to buy online when I'm going to so many shows. It's so fun to find things in person. You know, you feel a lot more like a Pokemon trainer when you can track cards down in person. Maybe that's a good question for you guys in the chat. As far as buying cards online, what would you say is your percentage of cards that you buy online versus that you buy or that you kind of get in person, whether through pack opening or, you know, trade nights at your LGS or card shows or all the other places where you could get things in person? Would you say you're the kind of person who's buying more online, or the kind of person who is picking things up in person? And I would say when I got started in the hobby, I was almost exclusively buying online. I didn't really have a connection to any local game stores. I went to, I think there's one around here that I would go to here and there. But for the most part, I was trying to find things on eBay and TCG Player. But then once I kind of discovered that card shows exist, I was like, whoa, kind of just total mindset shift. That was an exciting time the first time I realized that there's card shows and collectibles shows and things like that. It changed my life for sure. All right, that's all the V-Star and V-Max. Now we're going to get into illustration rares and some of the full art trainers. So the way we classify things, at least for our own simplicity in the inventory, is, like I said, these are going to be the full art or the illustration rares. And it's basically any of these cards from, you know, multiple generations that have like the entire card is an artwork, but they typically don't have texture. Like anything with texture would typically not be classified in this, except for a handful of exceptions. Things like the shiny Mew from Celebrations, and the Victini that is technically, I don't believe the Victini from Black Bolt and White Flare is an EX, and so it doesn't end up in this classification. So we've got illustration rares, full art trainers. We've got secret illustration rares, and those are basically the chase cards from Scarlet Violet and from the Mega Evolution generation. And then we got Alt Art Vs from Sword Shield, VMAX V Star from Sword Shield. Then we've got Sun Moon, which is almost all GXs and tag teams. Then we've got X and Y, and anything in the X and Y era that is not a half art, but is still worth like over 20 or 25 bucks will kind of meet that criteria. Oh, there's a Mew right there, look at that. And then everything else is, it kind of goes in the half art / vintage. And that was the first group of cards that we showed off after the slabs. And obviously we had a pretty significant inventory of those half art and vintage cards, many of them being vintage and not just like modern half arts that have some value. And that's because that's really what I look for, you know. The modern stuff is beautiful, and I collect a lot of it, and I appreciate it. But it's that older stuff that I really get excited about, and that I, you know, build out my vintage master set binders and stuff like that. And so that kind of comes back to, you know, a piece of advice that I have for people when they ask me, like, hey, like, you know, what advice do you have for your, you know, inventory management if I wanted to get into vending and or selling and that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, no matter what I say or anybody says, this is a hobby business. And not that you don't take it seriously, you don't, like, you know, try to earn a profit and that kind of stuff if it's your means of living. But what I mean by that it's a hobby business is that you're typically doing this kind of business because it's just more fun and a little bit more whimsical than you know, perceive like a corporate job to be. And I would agree with that. That's certainly something I believe, at least I espouse. And because of that, you have the flexibility, and I would say even it's more business effective to deal in the types of cards that you like. And I said this on a podcast previously where, you know, multiple podcasts where I've got interviewed by other people who are, you know, vendors, and they're trying to, you know, get some information about, you know, what are good plays or what are, you know, what are things that you're buying right now. And I'm just not as strategic as some of the other resellers out there. I really do like to just buy things that I like. And when I can kind of bridge that gap, or I kind of like marry the two sides of have things that you like, but then also have things that other people like so that they are business effective and sell really well, that's the perfect nexus for me. And that's where I really think that half art inventory comes in, and why I love that kind of stuff, because I really like it, and so I'm able to show a lot of like authentic excitement for it because I'm actually excited for it when I have it in the case, and when other people know what they're looking for and they're able to pick up those cards and add them to their collection, and they're really excited because obviously they're the kinds of things that you don't see every day. That just gets me so pumped. Love that stuff. So we're getting here towards the end of the illustration rares. Again, a lot of these are going to be from Scarlet Violet and the Mega Evolution era, because that's when the Pokemon Company really locked in on creating those full art cards that don't have texture but are still like really good hits for the sets. Now we've got some trainers, and this is something that I really personally, I do not collect our full art trainer cards. But respect to all of you who do and who are looking for these kinds of things. I try to keep a handful of them in stock, but not something that I personally really connect with. And I think that's just because my intro to Pokemon was really with the games, and specifically with the actual Mons, who that you'd train and battle with and that kind of stuff. That's where my nostalgia really kicks in, and not as much with the people. Okay, last section is the secret illustration rares, guys. All right, last section: Scarlet Violet, SIRs, and also the newest SIRs and chase cards from the Mega Evolution generation. So we've got a good amount of 151 here, and a lot of these 151 cards we kind of had in stock. I think like prior to Houston and going into Houston, and some of them sold, but we also bought some at that show. And then it was like pretty soon right after that those 151 cards just like all exploded in price on TCG Player. And I want to say last time I looked, a lot of them have retraced a little bit, but they're still like well above their all-time highs, and have reached new highs. And I'm curious to see what they do long term. Just like Evolving Skies, I am a huge believer in 151 long term being a set that like people are going to want to open, they're going to want to collect, they're going to want to get a master set, and the whole thing for years and years and years. I think that's pretty much undeniable. But there was also a ton of it printed. So it's kind of hard to say how it's going to do long term. I know that I did make like some official guesses on our midweek Machamps on our podcast, and said that I thought that, by the time April comes around, and hello, we're already in April, that I thought the packs would get to $20 a piece. And at the time that I made that estimation originally, I think it was like $12 a piece, 13 maybe. And it has surpassed that. I think that they're $25-ish a piece as of this video. And again, who knows what will happen. Obviously, when things really increase in price point, and I know that we hinted at this earlier in the video, but when things really increase in price point, new supply always enters the market and back into the community, because people who had that item or that product and were planning on holding it until it increased in value, it gets to a certain point, and people want to lock in those increases and sell and move that money into other stuff. That happens at all, every price point. At the $20, at $25 per pack, at $30 per pack, there's gonna be new people that decide to sell, and so it's hard to say, because I know there's a lot of people that are really heavily speculating into 151 being one of those all-time sets that can get to $50 a pack in a short period of time, and I think that's possible. The only question is when does that happen? And I don't know. I feel like the fact that it's run up so much in the last just a couple of weeks, honestly, I really don't know if it's going to continue on that trend or kind of bounce up again. But what I can say is, the amount of people that I've talked to, especially in 2024, who were telling me that they got back into the hobby because they kind of discovered the Scarlet Violet 151 set. It's so many people, guys. And so I have a lot of confidence that that's always going to be a nostalgic set. And now that I think we're officially, if I understand right, I think we've officially exited the window, the period of time in which the Pokemon Company would consider reprinting 151, and they've moved on to newer blocks and stuff like that. it seems to me like we're officially at the point where supply can only dwindle away as people open those packs at home or open them on live streams and that kind of stuff. I'll be interested to see if those packs start to get really pricey. Alright guys, last stack of cards here to show for the inventory. The Sylveon. And tell me guys, of all the cards in the entire inventory that you've seen in this video, and if you're here still, we're well over an hour into it, let me know which card was your favorite, which one are you looking for the most. And the last thing I'll say as we wrap up showing up these cards here is, if you're going to be at any of the shows that I mentioned earlier in the video, and you know you're wanting one of these cards that you see here, now they don't always survive every show, but we're always buying and trying to keep a good stock of these kinds of cards. So if you are looking for these and you don't see it at our table, just know that we usually have more than we can show in our finite number of display cases. So be sure to ask us if we have something specific in stock, and sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But yeah, again, we try to keep a really good, healthy inventory full of unique items. That'll about wrap it up, guys. If you stuck around to the end, thank you so much. Maybe leave me a little a spaceship, a rocket emoji in the comment section if you stuck around for the entire time. I appreciate you being here. We get a lot of requests actually to do these kinds of videos where we show off the entire inventory, especially before we go to big shows. Times are good. The market is very, very hot. There's a lot of negativity, like I said, out there. A lot of reasons to complain, and people that are complaining about things, but there's also a lot of things to be excited about. The hobby is growing, more people are getting involved all the time, and it's a great way for you to meet new people and to build a collection and to have a good time and to really get engrossed in something that can be well worth your time. And not all hobbies are like that. So thanks for being here. We'll see you guys in Fort Worth and at all those other shows in the future. And we'll probably do other future videos where we show off inventory, maybe once a month or so. Thanks again. Have a good one.